Thank you, Madam President. I am pleased to get to this point on this bill. The effort between HB 14 and Senate Bill 12 has come together, and in my opinion, is a tribute to a superhero. Madam President, I will not use her name today, but I know she's watching, and I want her to know that I'm thinking of her as we move this bill across the floor. She may not wear a cape, but in my mind she should, and she does. She brought the Schneider loophole issue to light, and because of that, we're solving this issue today. She's saving future victims by being the catalyst for this law that will finally hold violent sexual perpetrators accountable. Madam President, this victim rose from the ashes of a violent sexual assault to save future Alaskan women and children from the fate of watching someone walk free after forever negatively impacting another Alaskan's life. HB 14 was designed to close the Schneider loopholes in Alaska sexual assault laws. If you remember, Madam President, Alaskans were outraged and the case received national notoriety soon after sentencing was publicized in September of 2018 that Schneider would serve no prison time for his August 8, 2017 attack on a young woman. On that day, he introduced himself as Dan to the victim, who had never met him before, offered the 25-year-old woman a ride from a holiday station to her boyfriend's house. Instead, he drove to a different location, Madam President. He asked her to leave the vehicle, and as he did, she began to walk away, and I quote, Schneider tackled her, grabbed her neck with both hands to strangle her, and told her he was going to kill her. That's according to an APD alert. The victim lost consciousness and awakened to find that Schneider had sexually assaulted her by ejaculating on her. Madam President, victims have no faith in our system, and therefore it's estimated that more than half of the victims of sexual assault in Alaska do not report the crimes. Miraculously, this amazing young woman who this bill honors made the call. She rose above it and she reported. In spite of that, and due to Alaska law loopholes, a plea deal was struck. Schneider was sentenced to 2 years with 1 suspended, and he was given credit for electronic monitoring for the 1 year that he spent. And I will tell you that they manipulated the system by asking for continuances while he was on electronic monitoring. Therefore, he spent no time in jail for his violent crime. And due to the act not formally defined as a sex crime, Schneider was also not required to register as a sex offender. A lot happened because of this issue. A judge lost his job, a prosecutor probably should have. This effort began on this bill shortly afterward, after learning about the unacceptable sentencing results of the violent case. We began working with support groups such as No More Free Passes, 49th Rising, and CDVSA. I spoke to victims, judges, prosecutors, and experts on battling sexual assault to understand the enormity of the issue and to craft the right solution. The representative from District 40, who is in another committee, and I originally came at this from different angles, but what has been so fascinating, although we're from different communities, one rural and one significantly less rural, is that we came together at the end on this solution. We both have close friends and family members that have been victims of sexual assault. We both have young families that we thought about while working through this bill. I have 4 daughters and a wife, Madam President. We've had enough. And you can join us to not only honor this victim, this brave victim today, but to also tell perpetrators of sexual assault that we have had enough, that such crimes will put you in prison for a very long time in the future. So the bill covers every aspect of the Schneider loopholes. This is what it does, Madam President. It defines strangulation to unconsciousness as a crime of assault in the first degree. It ensures that harassment can still be charged separate from child sexual abuse. It adds other body parts to the definition of a dangerous instrument. It defines semen. It also adds knowingly causes the victim to come into contact with semen to the definition of sexual contact. It includes strangulation to unconsciousness to the list of aggravators in sentencing. And then as it being a true victim's rights bill, it requires that the prosecuting attorney confer with the victim regarding the whole case, including any plea deals. It includes provisions for rescheduling in order to allow time to notify the victim. It also removes credit for those convicted, sentenced for crimes against a person from electronic monitoring. There's a couple ways it does that. One thing it does, it says if you are, if the case is about a sex offense, electronic monitoring is no longer an option. On the other serious crimes, it allows credit for time served in a treatment program, which of course would be a residential treatment program where their liberties are restricted as though they're in incarceration. For the less serious crimes, it also clarifies that they can't take credit for both electronic monitoring and treatment. But it eliminates electronic monitoring for sex crimes, Madam President. This bill removes every aspect of the Schneider loopholes to protect future victims of sexual assault. It also supports the rights of victims to participate, and it holds perpetrators adequately accountable. If this bill were in place 2 years ago, Justin Schneider would be in prison today, and that victim would have known that Alaskans will not tolerate free passes to violent sexual offenders. Please join me in supporting this bill, and please also considering cross-sponsoring this bill. This bill tells Alaskans we will no longer tolerate Alaskans perpetrating sexual assaults without consequences, and I would appreciate your support on House Bill 14, Madam President. This really is a celebration of two individuals that came together on a compromise on how we're going to approach this with the key focus on victims. And he was a pleasure to work with along with his staff. There's more than one way to skin a cat, Madam President, and we feel that the aggravator actually works and can still result in the decades of an adequate sentence for a violent offender. It's not the way we went about it, but it works. It can get you the same amount of time. Each case is a different case. In some cases, likely we could put someone away for longer than that. Which brings us to the scary little hitchhiker discussion, Madam President, which I always appreciate the member from Juneau's animation when he discusses things. But I want to remind folks that the electronic monitoring is removed for the most egregious crimes. These are crimes against people. Felony crime against a person under 1141, crime involving domestic violence, murder, kidnapping, involving the delivery of a controlled substance to a person under 19 years of age, which is killing Alaskans on a daily basis, burglary in the first degree. How many homeowners have you heard from? We're living under the scourge of property crimes all over the state, and arson in the first degree. All of those can result in serious injuries, fatalities, and murders when those crimes go wrong. Those are very serious crimes. And you know what we're still saying? We're still saying that other than a sexual offense, which was the case of the Schneider loophole that we tried to solve, that we will give you credit for treatment. But remember that some of these burglaries result in a very short sentence of a year or so. We're willing to give credit for residential treatment, which could cut that down to 6 months or so. So we are cognizant of the impacts, yet we think it's the right balance. We are under a criminal epidemic in this state. We think it's the right mix. And remember, electronic sentencing can still be used as credit, electronic monitoring, for all those other less serious crimes. So when we talk about not turning someone into a professional criminal, we're only attaching the restriction to the crimes that are typically done by professional criminals. So we think it's the right mix. I appreciate the comments. I don't know that I disagree that electronic monitoring has a place for credit on the extremely low-level crimes, but I think it's the right mix. And if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I hope to see a whole bunch of green lights. This is an issue that Alaskans have been focused on, have been enraged about for a couple of years. We owe it to victims that we hear them, and we're there for them. Thank you, Madam President.